I recently spent $20 on the Wii U eShop, and for that $20 I got to wash dishes, throw ninja stars, trim beard hairs, be an elephant, murder Pikmin, and that's just scratching the surface. Pretty good deal, right? If it sounds odd to you, that's because, well, it is. The WarioWare games have always been a look into the crazy side of Nintendo. As a company, Nintendo presents a public image that's pretty reserved and well put together. But it almost feels like with the WarioWare games, they let all their crazy out in one fell swoop. These games star, you guessed it, Mario's homely and overweight counterpart, Wario, who in the Nintendo Wii edition of the series, Smooth Moves, stumbles upon an ancient, mystical instrument, the Form Baton, which looks strangely similar to a Wii Remote. And it's from here when the microgames start to take shape. From the game's map in Diamond City, you are able to take on a series of microgames, all hosted by different characters in the WarioWare universe. Ashley is struggling to get a plant to grow and requires you to take on microgames as part of an animated spellbook that claims to be able to help with the growth. While the Afro-laden Jimmy T and Jimmy P save stray cats and dogs, which both eventually lead to minigame-filled animal dance parties. All of the WarioWare titles are essentially minigame collections, and there are over 200 of them in Smooth Moves. Each one of these games utilizes the motion controls offered by the Wii Remote and IR sensor in a different way. The games range in scale, from a Wild West standoff and shooting down Godzilla to picking up a ringing telephone and sharpening a pencil. This is WarioWare in a nutshell. There are wacky microgames taking place in crazy, interesting situations, and then at the same time, there are games featuring mundane, everyday tasks that can sometimes prove to be even more bizarre. What's great about WarioWare games is their creativity and memorability, and the pure, unrestricted fun that results from that. In my case, I just had an absolute blast playing WarioWare Smooth Moves for the Nintendo Wii. Accurately describing WarioWare is tricky. At its core, it's really just a collection of extremely simple minigames. And what's so special about a bunch of little minigames, especially when most of the games last no longer than 5 seconds each? Well, the answer is nothing really. It's not the games themselves that make WarioWare so much fun to play. Rather, it's how the games are presented. Small, unique challenges strung together in a row, one after another at a fast pace. It's the thrill and frantic nature of trying to figure out how each minigame works on the spot, and then completing that action within the 5-second or less time limit. I say less because usually after every 4 microgames, the speed is increased, and you're given less time to complete the required actions. Your goal is to get to the end of each stage. Complete a microgame successfully, you move on. You fail a microgame, you get a strike. 4 strikes and you're out, forcing you to start the stage over. There are also boss stages, which provide a more in-depth, extended challenge to cap off each level. At first glance, WarioWare just looks like a collection of weird tech demos, and that's very well what some of the microgames might have started as. But in WarioWare titles, the microgames leave it up to you as the player to figure out how to complete them successfully. With only 1 or 2 words as direction in every microgame, WarioWare forces you to be fast while being clever and thinking on your feet. Take, for example, this game, where the only instruction is the word reunite. You're confused at first, as your Wii Remote pointer looks like a little egg with a face on it, but when you follow the arrow and drag it to the suggested area, the field lights up, showing a little egg-shaped family who you must drag and reunite the lost character with. That's the magic of these WarioWare microgames. At first, they're not meant to be studied up on. The best approach is to come into them blind and let them surprise you. Test your wit and see how many games you can figure out on the spot, and learn some of the trickier ones through trial and error. This approach maximizes the fun and frantic element of figuring out each new microgame that comes along. It's a good feeling successfully figuring out a microgame on the first try. It makes you feel clever, you avoid getting a strike, and can continue on without blemish. On the other hand, failing a game the first time around never fails to make you wonder, What did I do wrong? So on subsequent attempts at that microgame, you take a slightly different approach to see how that works out. It's a fun and addictive style of gameplay that often had me waggling the Wii Remote in desperation, trying to get the outcome I desired. It results in some adrenaline pumping sequences and more than a few laughs. Your initial playthrough is when WarioWare games are at their most surprising and fun. Then, once you get the experience under your belt, you can take what you learned about all the microgames and go for high scores or 100% completion, which to many is just as enjoyable. It's not game over once you see all 200 plus microgames either. This is due to the increasing difficulty system that unexpectedly adds new elements to familiar games. For example, this game, about picking Wario's nose, starts off with you having to deal with just one finger, but at a higher difficulty level, you must stuff 2 fingers in his nostrils, thus requiring a higher level of precision. Microgame difficulty is increased in a variety of ways. In some cases, an extra obstacle is added. For example, in this TV tossing microgame, the mouth of the trash disposal that once remained wide open now opens and closes at the higher difficulty level. So in this case, you must think about timing your throw correctly. Or take this game, where you need to set the Wii Remote down as your character is sleeping, then quickly pick it back up to retaliate, just as the ninja thief is about to steal your sword. After your first time completing the game, you might think you have mastered it, knowing exactly the right time to pick up the Wii Remote. But at higher difficulty levels, the animation changes. It starts playing visual tricks on you, messing with your sense of timing, so you don't know what to expect next. In WarioWare Smooth Moves, the form baton, or we can just call it the Wii Remote, is key. Each of the microgames fall into one of several categories based on how you must grip the Wii Remote to complete them. Some require holding the Wii Remote in the traditional grip to guide your pointer, while others require holding the Wii Remote horizontally in both hands. In others, you're holding it on top of your head like a mohawk, at your hip in the big cheese position, and some even require you to set the Wii Remote down on a flat surface. It's this control variety that sets Smooth Moves apart and makes it probably my favorite WarioWare game to date. The Wii Remote leads to the largest variety of control options for the microgames. Other WarioWare titles, like the one on DS and 3DS for example, have to deal with more limitations due to their hardware. These ones have touchscreen minigames, sure, and even a bit of gyro and maybe some microphone-based games mixed in, but that's really all there is to it. Even earlier titles in the series, WarioWare Twisted on the GBA for example, despite innovating with gyro-based controls well before they became a standard, the microgames were only limited to gyro and button-based controls. In the case of Smooth Moves, the Wii Remote, though only having motion sensing IR technology, allowed for a fantastic variety in its control scheme. WarioWare Smooth Moves takes full advantage of the form baton, and since it's a controller and the game is played on the TV screen, and not on an all-in-one handheld like the 3DS, you're free to hold the Wii Remote in different positions, allowing for different, inventive types of gameplay only possible on this hardware. For example, I found myself completing simple games such as wagging the Wii Remote to mimic knocking on a door and connecting numbered dots with the IR pointer, but I was also having fun with more inventive games, such as doing full body squats holding the Wii Remote on top of my head, and lowering the remote to my hips to simulate the act of hula hooping. These creative games were my favorite part of Smooth Moves. I was still enjoying the classic, frantically paced challenges that WarioWare always brings, but I was up, out of my seat, always ready to jump for the jump rope minigame, or to set the Wii Remote down on the table to prepare for the discard style games. For me, playing WarioWare Smooth Moves was a great change of pace physically. I know this is kind of weird to say, but it was pretty refreshing to move around and gently stretch my body while playing a video game. I think this is especially true for those like me who sit for extended periods at their jobs. I was more up and active during Smooth Moves than I expected to be. The physical aspect is not as intense as something like a Ring Fit would be, but it definitely had me moving. For some, this might be a turnoff, but for me, it was a pleasant surprise. Despite being the biggest attraction, and by far my favorite element of the game, the Wii Remote controls also brought their fair share of issues and annoyances. As with many motion control titles, there were times where the game felt unresponsive. I started to see certain microgames as an auto loss due to my inability to move the Wii Remote in the right way, even though I felt like I was doing the motion correctly. Some of these games I was able to figure out with practice, but some were just iffy overall. This is kind of embarrassing, but in my first few hours with the game, I was unable to get the motion to register with certain games. I actually thought my Wii Remote was defective. I have a launch day Wii Remote, and I thought finally maybe its time had come. But it turns out that my TV and sensor bar were just placed too high. I found it key to stay level with the sensor bar. If you raise the Wii Remote too high, like when using the Mohawk grip, the controls will become disoriented and might not register your movements. Over time, I got a feel for how the motions are registered, and learned a few tricks like this to get the best results from the microgames. As a whole, I feel the Wii Remote's motion controls work extremely well in Smooth Moves, with only a few exceptions, like the dance group boss stage. I think a lot of you watching this who already played the game know exactly what I'm talking about. Man, that took me way too many tries. WarioWare Smooth Moves is a super memorable experience. If you don't remember waving the Wii Remote around to the exceptionally groovy soundtrack, then you will remember the quirky art and set pieces that make up the microgames. WarioWare microgames almost seem like an abstract art exhibit, and while you're playing, you start to think to yourself, who's coming up with this stuff? You'll start seeing things like little people broiling a giant meat stick, an octopus and Wii Remote sandwich, and whatever this is. There are even a bunch of Nintendo-themed microgames here, which never fail to bring a smile to my face. Whether it was catching a fish as the Animal Crossing villager, ousting a fire with FLUDD, or slamming Super Metroid or Super Mario World into an empty SNES cartridge slot, I always enjoyed when these games appeared and seeing what Nintendo IP was to come next in the microgame shuffle. WarioWare Smooth Moves is a game I won't soon forget, and one that I'll always point to as a showcase for the success of the Wii Remote's motion controls. It's a shining example of the Wii Remote's innovation, and a game that continues to inspire joy in players to this day with its quirkiness, craziness, and fast-paced fun. Though at the time of this recording, a physical copy might be hard to come by, Smooth Moves is still available on the Wii U eShop for a pretty reasonable price. I think WarioWare Smooth Moves is a game that can be enjoyed by anybody with an open mind, and people who enjoy Mario Party minigames, timing-based games like Rhythm Heaven, and those who want to see the full potential of the Wii Remote in action should absolutely give this one a shot. And if you are already a fan of the WarioWare series, but have missed the Wii iteration, I highly recommend playing through Smooth Moves. It won't give you a wealth of content and replayability, as the full game is only a few hours long, but especially for the current day price, it'll give you an often much needed bit of fun and laughter on a scale that not many other video games can reach.